The Galactic Council chamber was an opulent spectacle of light and sound, designed to awe and intimidate. Ambassador Lila Reyes of Earth stood alone at the center of the crescent-shaped assembly, surrounded by towering, elongated podiums occupied by delegates of the galaxy's most powerful species. Their forms shimmered in holographic displays, representing beings as varied as crystalline entities, multi-limbed cephalopods, and scaled leviathans. All eyes, or their equivalent, were fixed on her, though most with little more than disdain. "You waste our time, human," droned Exarch Clyrus of the Sickville hegemony, her voice reverberating like a chime struck underwater. "Earth has proven itself incapable of managing its own affairs, let alone contributing to galactic stability. Your grievances are irrelevant." Lila gripped the edges of the central podium, her knuckles pale against the polished surface. "Irrelevant? You've crippled our trade, blockaded our colonies, and siphoned resources that don't belong to you. Humanity joined this council to work toward peace, but you've treated us as a nuisance to exploit. This must end." A ripple of laughter echoed through the chamber, low and mocking. Councillor Tharn, a beetle-like creature from the Varash Dominion, clicked his mandibles in a parody of applause. "Bold words for a species barely a century into interstellar flight. You expect us to take your demands seriously, Reyes? Your people are ants shouting at giants." More laughter followed, a cacophony of hissing, clicking, and guttural noises. Lila's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain composed. "You misunderstand humanity," she said evenly, her voice cutting through the din like steel against stone. "We are not here to threaten or beg. But mark my words, if you push us into a corner, you will regret it. We are a resilient species forged in adversity. And if you strike us, we will endure. We will adapt. And we will hunt you forever." The laughter ceased abruptly, replaced by an uneasy silence. Lila let the weight of her words settle, her gaze sweeping the room. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably, their forms flickering. Others, like Exarch Clyrus, radiated cold amusement. "Hunt us?" Tharn repeated, his mandibles twitching with derision. "Do you hear this, counselors? The humans think themselves predators now. You will not be the first species to make such claims," added Clyrus, her tones silky and condescending. "Nor the last to fall silent when faced with reality. I suggest you reconsider your stance," Lila continued, ignoring their taunts. "Because once the first shot is fired, you will learn what it means to be hunted by humans. And by then, it will be too late." The chamber erupted into chaos, a swirling storm of holographic protests and sneering rebuttals. Lila stood her ground, shoulders squared, but the council speaker, a translucent being of shifting plasma, finally raised a tendril of light, calling for order. "The council will deliberate," it intoned, its voice both melodic and chilling. "Ambassador Reyes, you may leave. Your presence is no longer required." Lila hesitated, then gave a curt nod. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the chamber, her footsteps echoing against the polished floor. As the massive doors sealed shut behind her, she exhaled sharply, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. They hadn't taken her seriously, and now Earth's survival rested on their next move, or hers. Back aboard her ship, the Unity, Lila convened with her advisors in the command deck. The mood was somber, the air thick with tension. General Marcus Steele leaned against the tactical display table, his scarred face grim. "They're not going to back down," he said bluntly. "They've made too much profit off us to let go now. And if we don't act decisively, they'll see it as weakness," added Commander Nyla Voss, a sharp-eyed strategist with a knack for anticipating enemy moves. "The Council only respects strength. Anything less invites more aggression." Lila rubbed her temples, exhaustion creeping in. "We can't win a direct war against them. Their fleets outnumber ours 100 to 1. But we can't sit idle either. Millions are already suffering because of their sanctions." Steele's expression hardened. "Then we do what humans do best. We fight smart. Guerrilla tactics, asymmetric warfare. Hit them where it hurts." Voss nodded, her eyes gleaming with resolve. If we can disrupt their supply chains and sow chaos within their ranks, we might force them to reconsider. They're arrogant, but that makes them predictable. Lila straightened, her resolve crystallizing. Then we make them regret their arrogance. Prepare the fleet. If they want to treat us like prey, we'll show them what it means to corner a predator. The Unity became a hive of activity as orders were relayed, strategies devised, and ships prepared for deployment. Humanity's fleets, though small, were fast and versatile, designed for adaptability rather than brute strength. They would need every advantage in the fight to come. Within days, the Council's response arrived, not in words, but in fire. A massive fleet descended upon Earth's orbital defenses, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts that lit up the skies like a second sun. Cities crumbled under the assault, and billions watched in horror as their homeworld burned. Lila and her team could only watch from the safety of the Outlands, their exile a calculated move to preserve humanity's leadership. The loss was devastating, but it steeled their resolve. Earth was wounded but not broken, and neither was its people. They've made their choice, Lila said, her voice trembling with controlled fury as she addressed her crew. They think they've destroyed us. But they've only lit the fire that will consume them. Today, we begin the hunt. The Unity led the charge, slipping through the shadows of uncharted space to strike at the Council's fringes. They targeted supply depots, trade convoys, and communication hubs, each attack calculated to disrupt and destabilize. Human ships struck like phantoms, vanishing before the enemy could mount a response. The Council's forces, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with superior numbers, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Their fleets floundered in the Outlands, trapped in deadly ambushes where asteroid fields and gravitational anomalies became humanity's greatest allies. Back in the Council chamber, the laughter had ceased. Reports of vanished fleets and sabotaged infrastructure painted a grim picture, and for the first time, the delegates felt a pang of fear. They are a disease, hissed Exarch Clyris, her composure cracking. A blight that must be eradicated before it spreads. But even as they plotted humanity's destruction, their unity began to fracture. Alien factions accused one another of incompetence, their alliances strained under the weight of humanity's relentless campaign. Lila watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of the Unity, her expression grim but determined. This was only the beginning. They had warned the Council. Now the galaxy would learn the price of ignoring humanity's resolve. The lights flickered dimly across the bridge of the Unity, illuminating weary faces bent over monitors and tactical displays. Captain Irina Vega stood at the center, her gaze fixed on the holographic map of Council-controlled sectors. It glowed with dozens of red markers, each one representing a vital target. Around her, officers moved with precision, their actions quick but quiet, as if any noise might shatter the fragile air of determination. "We hit them here," said Commander Nyla Voss, pointing to a supply line near the edges of the Valeric expanse. "A fuel depot supporting 3 major fleets. Take it out, and they'll be stranded for weeks." Irina's voice cut through the low hum of activity. "They'll expect us to go for something so obvious. What's the fallback?" Nyla's fingers tapped over the console, shifting the map to display a neighboring system. "An auxiliary station here. Smaller, less guarded, but just as critical. If we hit both simultaneously, they won't know where to focus." General Marcus Steele leaned in, his gruff voice laced with skepticism. "That's assuming they don't bait us into a trap. We've embarrassed them enough for one lifetime. They'll be desperate to catch us slipping." Irina's eyes narrowed. Desperation makes them predictable. They think in straight lines: force, overwhelm, conquer. That's their weakness. Ours is underestimating their capacity for spite. If they leave that depot vulnerable, it's because they want us to take it." Nyla hesitated. "So we ignore the depot entirely?" Irina straightened. "We use it. Let them think we've fallen for the bait. Deploy decoy signals. Make it look like half our fleet is converging on the depot while the other half takes the auxiliary station." Steele grunted in approval. "Classic misdirection. They'll scramble their defenses, spread themselves too thin." Irina nodded. It's not just about hitting them where it hurts. It's about forcing them to react to us. This isn't a war of attrition. This is a hunt, and they're the prey. Let's remind them of that. The plan came together with the precision of a scalpel. Decoy fleets, composed of drones retrofitted with signal beacons, were launched toward the depot. Meanwhile, a strike force of 20 ships cloaked their movements, slipping through uncharted space to approach the auxiliary station. Every calculation, every maneuver was designed to exploit the Council's reliance on rigid strategy. As the strike force entered the system, the auxiliary station loomed ahead, a pale orb surrounded by the faint glimmer of docking pylons. Nyla's voice crackled over the comms. Minimal defenses. Looks like they've rerouted most of their patrols to the depot. Irina's lips curled into a faint smile. They took the bait. Move in. Keep it clean, no unnecessary risks. The first salvo came without warning, streaks of blue plasma cutting through the darkness and slamming into the station's outer defenses. Shields flared and buckled under the assault, and alarms erupted across the station. Inside, alien workers scrambled in panic, their cries drowned out by the roar of humanity's arrival. Enemy ships on approach, called Lieutenant Rivos from the sensor station. 5 cruisers, bearing 317. Steele barked orders. Engage evasive protocols. Don't let them box us in. The Unity pivoted sharply, its engines roaring as it unleashed a barrage of missiles toward the approaching cruisers. 2 detonated instantly, their remains drifting in fiery arcs, while the others broke formation to avoid further strikes. Irina's voice was steady as she directed the attack, her commands sharp and deliberate. Divide and conquer, she said. Pick them off one by one. Nyla, take the Resolute and flank them. Draw their fire away from the station. Nyla's acknowledgement was swift, her ship peeling away to harry the enemy cruisers with calculated precision. The remaining human ships focused their fire on the station, targeting key infrastructure, fuel reserves, communication relays, and weapons systems. Explosions rippled across its surface, sending debris spiraling into the void. Captain, Rivas said, his tone urgent. We're picking up a distress signal from the station. They're calling for reinforcements. Irina's jaw tightened. How long until those reinforcements arrive? Minutes at most. Then we're out of time. Steele, status on extraction? Already underway, he replied. We've got teams pulling intel from their databases. Another 60 seconds and we're clear. 60 seconds felt like an eternity as the battle raged on. The enemy cruisers regrouped, their firepower intensifying, but humanity's fleet danced around their attacks with a fluidity that left them grasping at shadows. The Unity took a glancing hit to its hull, the impact shuddering through the ship, but Irina didn't flinch. Teams are back aboard, Steele reported. We've got everything we need. Irina didn't hesitate. All ships, disengage and retreat. Nyla, cover our exit. The human fleet pulled away, their engines burning bright as they disappeared into the void. Behind them, the auxiliary station was a smoldering ruin, its lights flickering weakly against the encroaching darkness. Nyla's ship lingered just long enough to unleash a final salvo, ensuring the station was beyond salvage, before vanishing after the others. On the bridge of the Unity, Irina allowed herself a moment to breathe. The tension in the air eased as the crew exchanged weary glances, their exhaustion tempered by the satisfaction of another victory. Damage report? She asked. Minimal, Rivas replied. A few hull breaches, but nothing critical. And the data? Steele grinned. Worth every risk. They were stockpiling munitions for an assault on one of our colonies. Now we know where and when. Irina's expression hardened. Then we know what to do next. Begin analysis immediately. I want a plan in place before their reinforcements even realize we're gone. As the crew dispersed to their stations, Nyla's voice came through the comms, her tone light despite the weight of their mission. That went smoother than I expected. Almost makes me think they're starting to lose their edge. They're not losing their edge, Irina replied. They're losing control. And that's exactly what we want. For a brief moment, silence enveloped the bridge, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's engines. Irina's gaze drifted to the holographic map, the red markers still glowing ominously. Each one represented a piece of the Council's power, but one by one, those pieces were falling. They think they're invincible, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. But every move they make brings them closer to collapse. They just don't see it yet. Steele chuckled darkly. That's the problem with being on top for too long. You forget how far you can fall. Irina nodded. And we'll be there to remind them. Every step of the way. The Unity and its fleet disappeared into the vastness of uncharted space, leaving behind nothing but wreckage and unanswered questions. In the days to come, the Council would scramble to piece together what had happened, their frustration mounting as humanity's shadow loomed ever larger. The hunt had only just begun. Signal disruption confirmed, said Commander Nyla Voss, her voice crisp as she studied the flickering holographic display. We've got a 6-minute window before they re-establish communications. If we're going to pull this off, it's now or never. Captain Irina Vega nodded, her gaze fixed on the illuminated schematics of the Zephyr relay, a critical node in the Council's communication network. It was heavily fortified, a shimmering beacon of alien engineering, but it had an Achilles heel. We move fast and surgical, Irina said, her tone razor-sharp. No collateral. No distractions. This is about sending a message. General Steele crossed his arms, his expression grim. And what message is that? We're smarter than you. They already know that, Captain. What they don't know is how far we're willing to go. They'll learn soon enough, Irina replied. Steele, you lead the decoy squad. Make enough noise to pull their defenses away from the main relay. Nyla, you're with me on the infiltration team. We go in quiet, plant the charges, and get out before they realize what's happening. Understood? The team acknowledged, and within moments, the Unity's hangar bay was alive with activity. Ships launched in coordinated waves, their engines roaring as they disappeared into the void. Irina, clad in her tactical gear, tightened her grip on her helmet and stepped into the drop ship. Her heart thudded in her chest, but her face betrayed no fear. The stakes were too high for hesitation. As the infiltration team approached the relay, the comms crackled with Steele's voice. We've got their attention. Cruiser patrols are breaking formation to engage us. You've got a clean path, but it won't last long. Irina's voice was calm and precise. Copy that. Keep them busy. We'll be in and out before they know it. The drop ship docked against the relay's outer hull, its clamps locking into place with a metallic hiss. Irina led the team through the airlock, the cold, sterile corridors of the station stretching before them. The team moved in silence, their steps muffled by the soft padding of their boots. Nyla's scanner beeped softly, mapping the relay's layout as they advanced. Security drones ahead, Nyla whispered, her fingers flying over the scanner's interface. 4 of them, patrolling in a predictable pattern. We can bypass them if we time it right. Or we could take them out, said Lieutenant Rivas, his hand hovering over his weapon. Less risk of them doubling back on us. Irina shook her head. No. We stick to the plan. No unnecessary engagement. Timing is everything. They waited in the shadows as the drones floated past, their glowing optics scanning the corridor with cold precision. Once the path was clear, the team slipped through, their movements synchronized and deliberate. Every second felt like an eternity, the tension coiling tighter with each step. Control room's just ahead, Nyla said, her voice barely above a whisper. 2 guards inside. Armed, but they don't look alert. Irina assessed the situation quickly. Rivas, you're on suppression. Non-lethal. Nyla, disable their comms. We can't afford any alarms. The team moved into position. Rivas fired a pulse round, the silent projectile striking one guard in the chest and sending him crumpling to the floor. The second guard barely had time to react before Nyla's stun baton connected with his shoulder, dropping him instantly. Irina motioned for the team to secure the room, her eyes scanning the control panels. Charges set here will disrupt their entire communication grid for this sector, Nyla explained, pulling a compact device from her pack. But we'll need to sync it with their power conduit to maximize the impact. Do it, Irina ordered. We've got less than 3 minutes before they start asking questions. As Nyla worked, Steele's voice came through the comms, strained but steady. We've got more company than expected, Captain. Looks like they called in reinforcements. We're holding them off, but it's getting tight. Understood, Irina replied. Hold as long as you can, then fall back. We'll be right behind you. The sound of distant footsteps echoed through the corridor, growing louder with each passing second. Nyla's hands moved faster, her brow furrowed in concentration. Almost there, she muttered. Irina turned to Rivas. Lock the door. If they get in before we're done, we're boxed in. The lieutenant nodded, sealing the entrance with a magnetic override. A faint thud followed as something struck the other side. The enemy was already trying to break through. Done! Nyla exclaimed, stepping back from the panel. The device hummed to life, its lights pulsing in a steady rhythm. Charges armed and synced. We've got 30 seconds to clear the blast radius. Irina didn't waste a moment. Move! Double time! The team retraced their steps at a sprint, the thuds against the door growing more insistent. As they reached the airlock, the station shuddered violently, the charges detonating in a controlled explosion. The lights flickered and died, plunging the relay into darkness. Sparks rained from the ceiling as alarms blared, their shrill tones echoing through the empty corridors. The drop ship awaited them, its engines already primed for takeoff. The team leaped aboard, and the pilot accelerated away from the station, the force pressing them against their seats. Behind them, the relay burned, its once pristine structure now a mangled wreck. Mission accomplished, Nyla said, her voice tinged with both relief and exhaustion. Steele's voice crackled through the comms. Good work, Captain. We're pulling back to the rendezvous point. Expect company on the way out. Understood, Irina replied. We'll cover your retreat. No one gets left behind. As the human fleet regrouped, Council ships swarmed the sector, their movements frantic and disorganized. Irina's fleet wove through the chaos, striking with precision and vanishing before the enemy could retaliate. By the time the Council realized the extent of the damage, the humans were long gone. Back aboard the Unity, Irina stood on the bridge, her team gathered around her. The mission had been a success, but the weight of the war still loomed heavy. She turned to Nyla and Steele, her voice resolute. This is just the beginning. They'll come at us harder now, more desperate than ever. But we've shown them what we're capable of. We've made them afraid. And fear is a powerful weapon. Steele nodded, his expression grim but determined. Let them come. They'll find out soon enough that we're not the ones who should be afraid. Nyla smiled faintly, her exhaustion overshadowed by a spark of hope. One step at a time. That's how we win this. Irina's gaze drifted to the stars beyond the viewport, her thoughts heavy with the cost of their defiance. But beneath the weight of it all, there was a flicker of something stronger, determination, unyielding and fierce. They thought they could break us, she said softly. But all they've done is make us stronger. Let's show them what that strength looks like. The bridge fell silent as the crew returned to their stations, the weight of their shared purpose unspoken but understood. The hunt continued, and humanity was far from finished. The briefing room aboard the Unity was quieter than usual. The crew, hardened by months of relentless strikes and daring escapes, now faced a mission that carried the weight of finality. Captain Irina Vega stood at the head of the table, her expression resolute as her officers exchanged grim looks. This is it, she began, her voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. The Council's last remaining superweapon, the Zenith array. If they bring it online, it won't just decimate our colonies, it'll hunt us down across the stars. We either destroy it now, or we lose everything. Commander Nyla Voss tapped on the display panel, projecting a hologram of the Zenith array, a massive orbital platform bristling with weaponry and surrounded by a formidable fleet. It's heavily guarded. Our previous strikes have forced them to consolidate their defenses. Any direct assault would be suicide. Irina nodded. That's why we won't attack directly. We're not here to win a fair fight, we're here to win. General Marcus Steele leaned forward, his scarred face illuminated by the blue glow of the display. What's the play, Captain? Hit-and-run tactics won't cut it this time. No, Irina agreed. This time, we go straight for the throat. The Zenith array is powered by a tri-core fusion reactor. If we overload it, the entire platform goes down in one shot. Lieutenant Rivas frowned. That's a hell of a risk. Getting close enough to sabotage a reactor that size, we might not get out. We don't need to get out, Irina replied, her tone unyielding. We just need to finish the job. This is bigger than any one of us. Bigger than this fleet. Humanity's survival depends on that array being destroyed. Nyla broke the heavy silence. You have a plan to get us in? Irina activated another projection, a detailed map of the array's defenses. The Council's expecting a full frontal assault. We'll give them one, at least enough to make them think we're desperate. While their fleet is focused on the decoy, our infiltration team will use stealth ships to approach the array undetected. Once inside, we overload the reactor and cripple their defenses. The fleet can handle the rest. Steele grunted. And if they see through the decoy? They won't, Irina said firmly. They're arrogant. They've spent this entire war underestimating us, and that arrogance will be their downfall. The officers exchanged glances, their doubts evident but unspoken. Finally, Steele stood, his massive frame casting a shadow across the table. We've followed you through worse, Captain. Let's finish this. Hours later, the Unity emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Zenith array's sector. The Council fleet, a shimmering wall of alien ships, immediately began to mobilize. Alarms echoed through the Unity's halls as crew members rushed to their stations, the tension palpable. Decoy teams, launch! Irina ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. Make it loud! Small squadrons of human ships darted forward, firing on the outskirts of the Council's formation. Explosions lit up the void, drawing the attention of the enemy fleet. The Council ships surged toward the decoy, their movements precise but predictable. Stealth team, you're up, Irina said into the comms. Good hunting. The infiltration ships, equipped with cloaking devices and silent engines, slipped past the chaos, weaving through debris and skirting the edges of enemy sensor range. On board one of the lead ships, Irina sat beside Nyla, her hands gripping the armrests tightly. Keep it together, Nyla said, her voice low but reassuring. This isn't our first infiltration. It might be our last, Irina replied, her gaze fixed on the array growing larger in the viewport. But if it is, we make it count. The stealth ships docked with the array's underside, their entrances seamless and unnoticed. Irina led the team through narrow maintenance tunnels, their weapons ready but pointed downward to avoid unnecessary noise. Reactors 2 levels up, Nyla whispered, checking the schematics on her wrist display. Guards are light here, but that won't last once we trigger the overload. Then we don't waste time, Irina replied, motioning for the team to move. They reached the reactor chamber, an enormous, pulsing core surrounded by glowing conduits. Nyla immediately began planting the charges, her fingers working quickly over the control panel. The rest of the team formed a perimeter, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Charges set, Nyla said after what felt like an eternity. We're good to. An alarm blared, cutting her off. Red lights bathed the chamber as automated defenses activated, turrets emerging from the walls. The team scattered as gunfire erupted, the sound deafening in the confined space. They know we're here! Rivas shouted, returning fire and taking out a turret with a well-placed shot. How long until the charges blow? 5 minutes! Nyla called back, her voice strained as she ducked behind a console. We need to hold them off until then. Irina fired at another turret, her movements sharp and precise. No. We need to buy time for the fleet. Nyla, can you set the charges to detonate remotely? I can, But we'd have to be off the array to trigger them. Then set it up, Irina ordered. Everyone else, fall back to the ships. Nyla and I will cover you. The team hesitated, their loyalty warring with their instinct for survival. Steele's voice came through the comms, a growl of urgency. You heard the captain. Move! One by one, the team retreated, their footsteps echoing as they disappeared into the tunnels. Irina and Nyla stayed behind, their weapons firing in controlled bursts to keep the defenses at bay. The array shuddered as the charges destabilized the reactor, its glow intensifying. It's done, Nyla said, her voice breathless. We need to go, now! But as they turned to leave, the entrance to the chamber exploded inward, revealing a squad of heavily armed council soldiers. Irina pushed Nyla behind cover, her jaw set in determination. Go, she said. Get back to the ship. I'll hold them off. Nyla froze, her eyes wide with shock. You can't be serious. That's an order, Commander, Irina barked. Go! Nyla hesitated for only a moment before nodding, her expression torn. For what it's worth, she said, her voice breaking. You're the best damn captain I've ever served. Irina smiled faintly. Then make it count. Nyla disappeared into the tunnels, leaving Irina alone with the advancing soldiers. The captain stood tall, her weapon raised as she faced them down. You wanted to know how far humans are willing to go, she said, her voice cold and unwavering. You're about to find out. The reactor detonated moments later, a blinding explosion that consumed the array and everything within it. The shockwave rippled through space, scattering the Council fleet and leaving the human ships untouched. On board the Unity, Nyla watched the destruction with tears in her eyes. The Zenith array was gone, and humanity had won. But the cost would be felt for generations to come. She did it, Steele said quietly, his voice heavy with both grief and admiration. She finished the job. Nyla nodded, her expression resolute. She showed them who we are. Now it's up to us to make sure it wasn't in vain. The Unity turned and disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the smoldering remains of the Zenith array behind. Humanity's fight was far from over, but for the first time, the galaxy had learned to fear the species it had underestimated for so long.